getting started now. All right, perfect. All right, I'm pleased to introduce our presenters for today's webinar. I am joined by Brian Yates. He is a member of the World Language Department at Red Rocks Community College in Lakewood, Colorado. He received his BA in History from Yale University and his MA in Hispanic Literature from Villanova University. In his extensive teaching career, both in the United States and in Latin America, Brian has spent 5 years at the high school level and more than a decade in higher education. The creator and developer of BigTimeSpanish.com, Brian is dedicated to improving student learning by creating online educational resources and implementing them in his courses. And our other presenter today is Meredith Hibbett, who is the chair of the World Language Department at Red Rocks Community College. She earned a BA in Spanish and a BA in Communication Studies, as well as her MA in Hispanic Literature at the University of Kansas. Meredith has been teaching in higher education for more than 15 years. She is dedicated to sharing her love for learning with her students online and in the classroom. And all right, at this time, I will go ahead and let the presenters take it away and get started. So Brian, go ahead and take the screen.
Hello, everybody. My name's Brian Yates. Thanks for the introduction, Natalie. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Natalie, it's saying I cannot while the other participant is sharing.
Ah, got it. There we go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right.
And I'm here too. This is Meredith Hibbett. So thank you all for joining us.
All right. And I am seeing your screen, Brian.
Great. So welcome, everybody. It's a real pleasure for us to be able to get to share with you guys today the work we've been doing with open educational resources and with SoftChalk in particular. And I think I can speak for Meredith when I say this has been a really exciting process and has produced some results that we're really thrilled about. So it's a real pleasure to be able to share with you guys and show you what we're doing. So the format for how we're going to do this today during this hour is we're going to shoot to spend more or less the first half giving you a little bit of a history and a tour of what we're doing. And then we will dedicate the second half to answering questions and try to take it in the direction that people are interested in. So, and by way of being a webinar, I'm going to be bouncing around a little bit between this simple PowerPoint you're looking at right now, which will give us some sense of structure, as well as a couple of different pages. We'll take you to our website. I'll show you how things look from a student's perspective, and I'll actually show you what's going on in SoftChalk as well. So there will be a little bit of navigator gymnastics going on, and hopefully that'll be as smooth as possible. So we'd like to start the conversation by talking to you a little bit about what life was like for us at Red Rocks Community College in the World Language Department, and specifically in the Spanish program before open educational resources. Meredith, why don't you go ahead and give us a sense for kind of what our 4 big problems were?
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay? Brian?
Yep, you're all set.
Great. So I'm just going to give you a little history. We used to use Puntos, which is with McGraw-Hill, and we used to have a physical textbook and a physical workbook. Then we moved to an online textbook and an online workbook, and we just kind of kept having the same 4 problems. For the online textbook and workbook, the cost was roughly $150. And we have a lot of low-income students, and this cost was just financially challenging for a lot of our students. The second problem was just accessing online materials. Students had problems accessing these online materials from the publishers. When they paid their $150, they would receive a code. And at times, students reported difficulties either getting the codes, or the codes that they received didn't work, and they would need to return to the bookstore or contact the publisher. And there were times it would be, day 3 in our class, and some students still did not have access to materials. This meant they couldn't do their homework. Students would start to fall behind quickly and get frustrated. And this was just not a good way to start our semester. And we know that at times students did drop due to some frustration.
And I'll jump in there real quick. Can you still hear me? Are we both together, Natalie?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great. So, because we're in the world language department and we're Spanish, a lot of our students come into our particular introductory level classes with a lot of enthusiasm. They're really excited about learning Spanish. And it's just a huge buzzkill to say, oh, I know you're so excited about Spanish, but now you have to deal with all these technical issues. And I know you spent a bunch of money, but you still don't have access. So it just kind of, not only did it create technical problems and logistical problems, it also sort of just kind of muted all the enthusiasm we started the semester with. The third problem was that we often had tech issues with the online materials. So what that looks like is sometimes the online materials from the publishers wouldn't interface well with whatever browser the students were using. So they simply couldn't open a page, or they couldn't receive the material that was being served to them. They might have difficulty accessing a video or couldn't hear an audio file. And then sometimes they would submit an answer and the answer would not be accepted, or they couldn't understand why the answer was wrong because they weren't getting a pop-up or something like that. And so what we noticed was that our students were getting bogged down on these little things that as an instructor, you might say, oh, don't worry about that. But when a student is working individually in the evening by themselves, they often would get frustrated, and it just created, like Meredith said, a lot of obstacles to a smooth quality experience. The fourth, and perhaps for me the most notable of these problems we had, was that we were always bound to the organization and content of a textbook. So Meredith and I are both instructors in Spanish, and basically any Spanish college level textbook is going to have a trajectory of grammatical content, vocabulary, and cultural content. And if you're going to use the book, you basically have to follow the book. Otherwise, if you split it up, you wind up in places where there's no context and people don't understand how you got there. But the textbooks don't necessarily reflect our student learning outcomes. They don't necessarily reflect our teaching styles, and they certainly don't reflect our personal experiences. My personal experience with the Spanish-speaking world is in the United States and Latin America, and Meredith, yours is principally
Spain.
Principally in Spain. So if they're asking me to talk about something in Spain, it may not make as much sense. And if they're asking Meredith to talk about something in Ecuador, it may not make as much sense. So we always sort of felt a little hogtied to what the book wanted us to do. And we were always trying to sort of wrest independence from it, but it never really worked. It was very frustrating. So those were the four major issues that just kept coming up over and over and over again. And so naturally, we wanted to solve those problems. And it occurred to us that we might be able to solve those problems by moving to open educational resources, because what that would allow us to do is compile a set of resources and create a class that fit our student learning outcomes, our personal experiences as instructors, and the needs of our students more specifically and more importantly. So we built our and what we're going to do is talk briefly about what this class structure looks like. What we did was we built our classes primarily around a website called bigtimespanish.com, which I could best describe as a reference for Spanish grammar and vocabulary. And it's an open educational resource designed to be used by anybody who wants it at no cost. And this is our primary teaching tool. So if you say, well, how do the students learn the material the way a textbook would show it to them? Our answer to that is we have a website that functions in that place. We've also incorporated a host of other OERs to reinforce the material on Big Time Spanish, such as video and audio and other kinds of activities. And I'll just make a quick note right at the outset here that all of the material we're using does not interfere with any copyright issues. So our material is open resource, it's shared resources, and in many ways OERs is a little bit of the Wild West of the educational world, but we decided for today we're not going to get into the whole copyright thing, but for the purposes of our materials, now we wanted you to know that we're working with stuff that is open. So what do we do when you're pulling together a bunch of stuff? We wanted to create a coherent structure so that our students got the sense that there's regularity, that there's consistency, and they understand how we're progressing through the semester. So we divided up all of our classes within a course, and most of our courses here at Red Rocks are 30 sessions, sort of a typical 15-week college semester. And every single class, meaning each session, has 5 pieces. And so Meredith's going to take us through those 5 pieces.
Yes, so the structure of each class looks like this. And we highlighted in red, so what you see in red there on the PowerPoint, those are the places that we use SoftChalk. So when a student goes into a class, the first thing is there's always an evaluation of old material. And typically students are quizzed over, previous grammar, previous vocabulary, and this is kind of recycled. Second, the students learn and practice new material. And typically this is done through a tutorial in SoftChalk. So this could be about, Spanish grammar, or again, a vocab set, but we're delivering that through a tutorial in SoftChalk. Next, there's an evaluation of the new material that they just learned on SoftChalk. And for us, this is through quizzes in D2L, so desire to learn. And then fourth, the students do their listening activity. And we have found these as, we found them online as OERs. And so students are watching videos of native Spanish speakers, and then they do an activity. And the last thing that they do is there's an application of new material. And this is what actually happens like in our classes on campus. So this is kind of our lesson plan. And again, so we're using the SoftChalk for numbers 2 and 4 there. And for the first one and the third one, we largely use the quiz function in D2L. And the last one, typically that's happening in class. And we're not exactly going to get into our lesson plans, but feel free to contact us if you wanted any more information about how we're doing the rest of this.
Great, thanks, Meredith. I'm gonna transition over to what our actual classes look like in D2L, so you can see how that class structure plays out, and then we'll get into the SoftChalk so you can see that as well. So here's a Spanish 111. This is a copy of our course. We've got a fake, our renowned fake student whose name is Don Nadier, which is Don Nadier, for those of you who speak Spanish, means Mr. Nobody. So we'll be looking at the grades of a fake student and his performance, which is summarily atrocious. He fails every class he takes and has failed every class since he first enrolled at Red Rocks. So in class 12 here, this is our Spanish 111. That's Spanish Language 1, the introductory college level Spanish language course. And this is from this semester. This was due at the end of September. You'll see that there are 4 steps. Now, this is a hybrid course. So what this means is the students would complete these 4 steps prior to coming to class. And then that 5th piece that Meredith talked about, the application of material, is the class session itself. So step 1, they take the home review 1 quiz. That's the evaluation of old material. Step 2, they learn the prepositions of place and cardinal points. That's the new learning and practicing of new material. Then they take a prepositions of place quiz. That's the evaluation of new material. And then there's a listening activity. So we're going to jump right into show you what the students see. So they click on step 2, and assuming the blue wheel of death cooperates, then they will be taken into a SoftChalk page. We call this a tutorial. That's the language we use in our college, so people understand what we're talking about. So what I want to do is just point out what this looks like. What you're actually seeing right here is a website in a website. So SoftChalk is creating a site that we are able to serve through D2L, so the students don't have to go to a separate location in order to access it. So up at the top here, you see there's a title, prepositions and cardinal points, and then the students are going to go through and get a score, and they're keeping track of the score up here where it says 0 out of 6. On the left, you've got a table of contents, which shows you the number of pages and then what's on each page. And we have tried to make our pages very consistent so that students aren't struggling with what to do, but can get right to the matter. So here you see the instructions, and we sincerely hope that all of our students read the instructions, although experience suggests that's not always the case. But it always starts with instructions. And then what we've got here is the first tutorial, prepositions of place. Now what we're doing here, and this is where SoftChalk really, for us, becomes super powerful, is we are serving them the page of Big Time Spanish directly into SoftChalk. So we're not saying go to Big Time Spanish and check out this page and click here. We're just saying, boom, here it is. So it gets a little bit abstract. We say this is a website inside of a website inside of a website. That's basically what we're doing, is compiling a bunch of stuff and serving it up to the students so they really don't sense that there's a difference. So in this case, we're asking them to watch a particular video. And this scroll bar here allows them to go through the page that they need to be in. And here you can see there's a video that they're going to watch. And it's also going to allow them to do flashcards, right? So for example, for learning prepositions, you can quiz yourself on your Spanish. What is the word in? And we have en. They can do that. Then they can scroll down and take a practice quiz. And again, this is all stuff that's on Big Time Spanish. So anybody who wants to use Big Time Spanish can go there and do all these things. To the left would say a la derecha. Again, I'm not doing a good job here. That's going to be wrong. It says, oh, wrong. The correct answer is a la izquierda. So all these are being served directly to the student. And then when they're done with that work, we are able to use what in SoftChalk is called a quiz popper to ask them a question. And what we're doing here isn't so much evaluating their understanding of the material, so much as they're having completed what we asked them to do. So as you can see, the question here is, did you watch the video twice, repeating the words out loud for the first time and taking notes the second time? And the students would answer, check their answer, and then move on to the next page. When they move on to the next page, they'll see that we're prompting them to learn how to memorize vocabulary with flashcards. Again, this is a Spanish 1 class, very introductory. So we are going to use a quiz popper to check their progress there and see if they have done that. And you can see this is sort of textual. And then we're asking them, have you practiced? Have you done all these things? We go to the next page and they're being prompted to take a practice quiz, which is being served to them on Big Time Spanish. And then we are asking them, did you do this? And as we keep moving through the pages, they're being asked to watch another tutorial. This is a pretty healthy tutorial. They're not all this long. Did you do this thing? And then eventually there's another tutorial and we get to the bottom and we're asked again, did you do this thing? And then they click finish. Really quickly, that's not, depending on what you're doing with the tutorial, you can do things in a different way. So I want to jump to a different class really quickly and show you the kind of other things you can do with SoftChalk. It doesn't have to just be serving up videos and practice quizzes. There are lots of activities that you can build in directly into SoftChalk. And the geek in me will say you can have a lot of fun just playing with stuff. But here's an example. In Spanish 1, our students learn irregular verbs. And so we created this little exercise where they click on the deck here and they get a verb and then they have to decide where it goes. So that goes there, congratulations, that goes there, congratulations, that goes there. And they keep going and practice that way. And then again, in this one, they would finish that.
Yeah, and
So,
feedback from students, they really like these types of little games.
it's super fun, and honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because of the way SoftChalk is set up, we'll show you in a minute, it's super easy to build these kind of things. And they're really fun, and the students can repeat them as many times as they want. One nice functionality about SoftChalk is the students can you can create a tutorial and they can go back in and do it again and go back in and do it again, or you can set it so that they only have 1 opportunity or 2 opportunities or 3 opportunities. In our case, we want them to do it as much as they can, so we have unlimited opportunities to do that. So if we go back to, we were in class 12 there. So that shows you what a tutorial looks like generally. That second component where we use SoftChalk is for our listening activities. So if Don goes into the listening activity, he's going to see something that looks a little bit different. Again, you see this same template. So every page looks the same. We have this teal color with our title and our score and our contents and our instructions that we hope they read. And then here we have a video. And if I were to play this video, you would see or hear Christina speaking about her home. If you recall in this class, the review material was about the home. So we have her speaking about that, and they're instructed to do some stuff with it. And then to give you a sense again of the functionalities of SoftChalk, what we've done is included the Spanish transcript as what's called a tooltip, where if I go over this text, it appears, and if I click it, it stays. So a student can be scrolling through the Spanish transcript as they're listening, or they can make it go away. And we have parameters around that, what we recommend. And then the same thing with the English transcript. They can click on it and then scroll through it as they're listening to follow along with what Christine is saying in translation. And then again, we have a checkpoint here and saying, did you do what we asked you to do? And then they would go on to the next page and basically do the exact same thing again. with Luis, who's from Costa Rica and is also talking about his house. Same setup. You have the Spanish translation, the English transcript, and then a checkpoint. So that is kind of the primary way that we implement SoftChalk into our courses. And again, as you can see, it's really seamless. We've got lots of different things coming at the students, but they have no sense that they're different things. It feels like one seamless piece. And what's really cool about this, in addition to that, is also that this syncs directly with our gradebook. So here I am as an instructor in this class, the same class, and Don Nadia just took that prepositions of place tutorial. And so if I go to my gradebook, which is going to be just one student and empty, and I go to prepositions of, well, maybe I may not have finished it, but let's go into see what it looks like in the content section. If I go in as an instructor, what I get to see is, so the grades will import automatically into the D2L gradebook. I'm not quite sure why they didn't in that scenario.
I don't think you clicked finish.
I didn't click finish.
Yeah, so
which our students will occasionally do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just clicked on the wrong thing. Sorry, that was the quiz. We don't want to take the quiz. Let's click on the tutorial. So while that's happening, I'm going to go back and finish Don Nadia's. Okay, so when I click on it as an instructor, what I see is what's called the Score Center. So this is really neat. What this allows me to do is see how Don did on the prepositions of place and cardinal points tutorial. So there's a lot of functionality that I can play with here. I can change how it's graded, whether I want the most recent score, the highest score, the lower score. Again, we can change the number of attempts, so we can play around with that. But what we find really most useful is down here where it says learner, we get a lot of data about what our students are doing. Now, we don't necessarily look at all the data for all the students all the time, but we have is a diagnostic to see if a student says, I'm struggling with X topic, we have a lot more information about what's going on. So hypothetically, let's say that the tutorial comes along for learning irregular verbs, and then we get an email or Don shows up in my office to say, hey, I'm really struggling. I say, okay, well, okay, Don, I see that you completed this tutorial 2 days ago at 9 p.m. Okay, great. And you tried it twice. I also see that you got a grade of 3 out of 6, and that's 50%. So we can actually jump in here and see exactly what he did. So since I know this tutorial, I could say, okay, looks like you did the first part. You answered yes. You watched the videos. Oh, good job, Don. You made the flashcards. Congratulations. And oh, hey, Don, I'm noticing here that you didn't practice with your flashcards. And then Don says, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I just, Thursday night football, and I just, things got away from me, and I couldn't get it done. So what that allows us to do is hone in on exactly what the problem is. And in this case, the student's not actually following the instructions. The student's not actually doing the work we're asking them to do. Now, that could come through in different ways. A student could do all the work and then be struggling on a quiz, and we could keep digging down. But what this allows us to see is some really important data about where the student is having difficulty and when the student's having difficulty. So again, if we go back to the student list, you might see that 3 attempts done at 4 a.m. in the morning. And we might ask, well, hey, Don, like, why is it that you're studying at 4 a.m.? And, oh, well, I just thought it'd be a good time to study after, getting home from the club and stuff like that. And you think, well, maybe that's not the most appropriate time or the most effective time to be studying. So that's how we can use SoftChalk to check in with our students, and how SoftChalk can give us really key information about what's going on with our students. And oh, here we are. Okay, so this is how that number 3 got imported into the student's gradebook. So Don took it, he got a 3, and bam, 3 goes right into the gradebook. So there's no logistical issue with D2L interface that's desired to learn our learning management system with SoftChalk and the grades. It works seamlessly, and we've never had an issue with that. So to go back to our PowerPoint real quickly, we talked about that, and we talked about sample SoftChalk, and then we just talked about tracking student progress in the Score Center and connecting to the D2L gradebook. So before we wrap it up, I wanted to just quickly show you a little bit under the hood. And this isn't really a webinar dedicated to how to use SoftChalk Create, which is SoftChalk's software for developing these pages. But I just wanted to show you, because many of you may be tech savvy and some of you may not be, this is really easy to use. It basically feels like, and hopefully Natalie, I'm not disparaging SoftChalk, to an introductory person, it feels like you're using a really powerful Word document where you set up titles or headers and you can type stuff in, and then you can just insert this iframe placeholder is a video, and this inline multiple choice quiz is a quiz, and it's as simple as clicking insert. Let me get into a place where it'll actually let me do that. Clicking insert, and then you would click on activity, or you would click on a quiz popper, and you could do a essay, a feedback question, matching. You could do multiple choice. You can do ordering. You can do all kinds of activities. You can do charts, crosswords, drag and drop, flashcards, image maps, jigsaw puzzles. There's tons of stuff here. Way more stuff, to be honest, than I really have time to play with. I could get away from me sometimes. Changing the setup of it is really easy. So we can go to, for example, the properties. And if I'm thinking, oh, I'm tired of teal, I want to spice it up a little bit, I can make it maroon. And then to give you a sense, boom, there's my new look. So the students go, wow, you went really colorful on us all of a sudden. And so playing with it is really super simple. And SoftChalk Create looks like this. And you can see this, your sort of, your editor toolbar up here, very easy to use. Again, I think for me, it was easy to think of it as similar to Word. And you can see I added in a page break to create a separate page, and very, very simple to use. I think you can get more sophisticated than I am, but I just wanted you to see that there's not a big learning curve to just getting started with building something. The first thing we did was just a page with a video, and I think I was done in less than 5 minutes. That was really cool. So, and if you have more questions about using Create, obviously SoftChalk and Natalie's team is probably a better resource than me, because they're the ones that are the masters of it, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions or help people to the best of my ability with respect to that. So let's go back to the slideshow and wrap things up before we open up for questions. So before OER, we had these 4 problems. We had the textbook costs, we had the accessing online materials, we had the tech issues with the online materials, and we were also bound to this textbook organization and content. And so Meredith, tell us where we are now.
Well, we have solved all of our 4 problems. So we have 0 cost. So there's no textbook fee. There's no fee to take our course except for the credits. And there's no code access anymore. So the students don't have to get a code and put in a code or anything. They just have automatic access on the first day of class. Our OERs that we are using, we feel they are very reliable. We don't have any copyright issues. And really the best thing is that we control our content, we control the organization of our content, and we can match right up with our student learning objectives. And we really just, I would just even say, we just feel happier now that we can focus on our students and teaching Spanish, and we can do it from, how we want to do it.
And just to piggyback on that, our classes actually open up at Red Rocks a week early. The online platform, the D2L piece, the shell, opens up a week early. So the students can step into the class a week early with the entire semester, all the materials ready to go. And many of our students will show up on the first day saying, oh, I've already done the first class and it feels so great. I'm ahead. I've got 100 in the class. It's really great. And the tech issues piece is great because if anything does create a problem, we are the ones who control it. So we could, in theory, just remove it and put something else in. And we often do that. In the past, if we've had an issue with a particular topic, it's really difficult to say, well, I don't like chapter 7, so I'm going to remove chapter 7. But in our case, we regularly try something where we think, oh, that didn't work, and boom, we can just remove it immediately midstream. So yeah, I agree with Meredith. We feel happier, it feels lighter, and our students have really responded to this by expressing clearly that they really love this system and it works really well for them. And of
I've
course,
had
you know, our
students
main goal,
applaud.
yeah,
when
our
I
main
tell
goal is
them
to
there's no textbook.
yeah, and there will never be one for all the
Yeah.
courses you take. So,
Mhm.
you know, our main goal is to be of service to our students and to help them grow in the ways that they can within the context of Spanish and the Spanish-speaking world. And this really helps us to do that in a more effective and a more meaningful way. So we'll wrap things up there. And at this point, we'll turn it over to Natalie to facilitate some questions and answers.
Great. Thank you both for that. That was really interesting, and it's exciting to see all of the problems that you've solved. A lot of the questions that came in, you all actually answered during your presentation, so that worked out really well. 2 questions that we have right now are, have you had any problems with creating your video content?
Okay. Do you want to give us both of those questions, or should we just start with that
Oh,
one?
you start with that one.
Okay. Meredith, do you want me to answer this one?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so creating video content for me has been, I've been largely in charge of creating the video content. The problems largely come from what software I'm using. So while our classes are open educational resources for our students are not absorbing any cost, we are using software that does come at a cost. For example, SoftChalk Create is not an open educational resource, right, Natalie? It's you guys aren't going in that direction.
Not free.
Yeah, it's not free. You have to pay for it. And our institution, our director of instructional technology has an account with SoftChalk, and so we have it as part of our college. It has been my experience that if I have the right software, making the videos is a lot easier. So I actually use a software called Camtasia that is a pretty high-powered video production software. And most of my videos are basically glorified PowerPoint presentations. But because of Camtasia, what I can do is cut and slice and twist and chop things so it looks a little bit fancier. I can do things like highlight the mouse so it moves. I can have a picture of myself inside of, you know, video footage of me talking inside of a video. But really, it's basically just PowerPoint, kind of what we're doing now, PowerPoint with voice and mousing and with a little bit of video, and then I use the software Camtasia to chop it up. We have played around with other software options, and to be honest, haven't found one that works quite as well. You can actually on a PC turn a PowerPoint into a video, but you don't have a whole lot of editing capacity, so you got to make sure you nail it before you turn it into a video, and it has to be just the way you want it. So hopefully that answers that question in terms of creating video content.
A couple people have asked or have you run into, and what do you do if a student wants a physical textbook? Someone mentioned, can you package the content in D2L into a physical textbook or e-textbook, or have you had any issues with that?
Meredith, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I haven't had a request for a physical textbook in several years. But one of the things that we can do is part of Big Time Spanish, there's always an overview, and the overview kind of works as like something that you can print out. So it might have the conjugations of the verbs on it, or it would have the vocab list that they're going to be quizzed on. So we give that material to them, or they can print it themselves. So they do have like reference pages. They just don't have a full textbook. Anything
What's
else,
interesting
Brian?
is that when we moved from a traditional textbook, you know, I was going to say brick and mortar textbook, but they were not made of brick and mortar. Paper and cardboard textbook with a workbook to an online textbook and workbook. When I think, Meredith, my experience was when we had an online textbook, that's when students were saying, I would like a paper copy of the textbook.
Yes, and they could get that.
Because the online textbook is basically just a textbook in a web page, and I think the students were feeling at times disoriented by that. One of the things that's different about what we're doing now is that because the material is being served in such a straightforward and consistent manner, we don't find that our students are saying, I can't find X, or I don't know where X is. They just are very comfortable bouncing back and forth between what they need to find and what they need to do. And to be honest, I haven't had anybody ask me for a physical specimen of textbook or printouts since we moved in this direction, which has been very, very refreshing.
I agree.
Have you had any issues with the administration at your college giving you any problems for choosing not to have a textbook?
No, I'd say the opposite. They're very supportive of us going open education resource.
Great.
We, as a community college in the Metro Denver area, at least since I've been here for about 10 years and Meredith's been here for a few more, there's always been an impetus to try to keep costs as low as possible. So when we said we'd like to have zero textbook costs, that was not met with any resistance. We also have as far as accreditation is concerned, we were an AQUIP school up until very recently when we received our new accreditation. And so we were involved in a lot of continuous quality improvement, and we have a pretty robust operations plan and student learning plan that clearly articulates our student learning outcomes and how our evaluation structure allows us to get data to demonstrate that we're accomplishing that. So I think the main thing isn't so much that the resource itself is what it is so much that we're able to articulate how we are accomplishing what we need to be accomplishing within the context of the state. And I'll say that right now in the state of Colorado, there's a lot of momentum towards OER. And we actually were lucky to be the receivers of a grant to fund some of this work. And we're currently trying to get our fingers back in the pie to get some more loot for another round of this to work on other courses that we'd like to go OER.
Great. We've had a couple questions come in regarding accessibility. And I know the content created in SoftChalk is accessible, but they're asking how you all specifically deal with that in the Big Time Spanish website using captions or screen readers. I don't know how much experience you all have with that, but those are a couple of questions that we've gotten. So
accessibility is a great question. Why don't we kind of tackle this together, Meredith?
Okay.
Do you want to talk about first just like maybe Word documents and stuff like that, the PDFs that we put up?
Yeah, so anything that we are posting is accessible, and we just typically use Word documents to do that, and just create the headers. And we were all trained at our college on how to create accessible documents over the last maybe year or two. That was a requirement for all of us. So we've just been putting that into practice, and anything that we're posting on D2L.
Yeah, and for anybody who's not comfortable or is not familiar with creating accessible Word documents in Word, once we learned how to do that, we have found that our communication with students is much clearer because it kind of forces us to articulate what is the title, what is the heading, and everything looks really clear. So in addition to being accessible, we found that using accessible Word and PDFs has made our materials clearer. So anything we're posting that's, word processor type document, like Meredith said, is straight up accessible. SoftChalk covers us in that front. With D2L, with Big Time Spanish, we have closed captioning because they're bilingual videos. What I've actually done is they're served through either Vimeo or YouTube, and both Vimeo and YouTube have an automatic closed captioning system, but that doesn't actually get you to full, WGA 2.0, I think it is, standard. So what we have is transcripts, and the transcripts are loaded up as a text document, and then YouTube turns that into captions for Big Time Spanish. And then we just try to keep our eyes and ears open for what's going on with respect to accessibility. We do have, fortunately, a lot of support in our Office of Instructional Technology for, hey, is this accessible? And we have people that can show us yes, it is, or yes, or no, it is not. So we're always open to the possibility that something is awry and we need to fix it. But we try to make sure that everything is accessible. And the videos is largely about just having actual transcriptions uploaded to YouTube or Vimeo that you get 100% accuracy in the captioning. And I would encourage anybody who's doing this to just take your periods and commas seriously. When you're speaking through a transcript, if you make a nice pause between commas and periods, then YouTube will catch it and break it up perfectly, and you won't have to do any more work.
And a follow-up question to the transcripts, someone was asking if you do your transcripts first, or do you wait until YouTube generates them and then kind of edit from there?
No, I do them first.
Okay.
And that's super important. It's much less work. And I've also found that, so going back to the video piece, when we first started building videos, the reason why I started doing video at the beginning was because I kept having students coming to my office saying, hey, I missed class. Could you teach me this? And I'd say, okay, yeah, no problem. But then if that happens 20 times, there's not enough time and it just gets a little tiresome to teach the same material. And I thought, gosh, if I just had a video of me, I could show them. And so I started trying to do videos. And what I found was these videos were getting excessively long, like 25 minutes to teach the difference between, for those of you who might know Spanish, ser and estar, two verbs that both mean to be. And so I started writing and realizing that if I changed the way I was speaking, I could get these videos done in 4 or 5 minutes. So I started composing in a much more streamlined way. And then I rehearsed the transcript so it doesn't sound like I'm just reading from it, but I am effectively reading from the transcript. And then that way the video goes off much faster. I don't have to type out what I said, and then I can just post it, and it's really quickly. So my early inclination was to just go off the cuff, but I found that by having a good script and by really wordsmithing what I was saying, I could get my videos down to a much shorter period of time. They're much clearer, much more direct, and it makes it a lot easier on the tech side. And we kind of use the general rule of thumb that try to not have the videos be longer than 5 minutes. We might give them a bunch of videos, but there's that kind of new attention span with respect to videos that if you say watch 4 or 5 minute videos, they'll do it. And if you say watch 1 20-minute video, they won't. So we try to make sure they're all very short, which also keeps the transcripts short. Hopefully that answers that question.
Great, thank you. I'm sure this is personal preference based on the educator, but someone was asking how long or how many pages should a SoftChalk lesson be, and how many activities within a lesson seems reasonable for a student?
It's a great
Well,
question.
I'm sure it varies.
It does.
Well, let me go back. Meredith, why don't you give your perspective on that? While you're doing that, I'm going to go back to one of these SoftChalk lessons so we can take a look.
So I think it does vary. And we do try to keep it pretty consistent so that like students aren't one night being asked to do, 3 hours, and then the next night they're only doing a half an hour. So we do try to keep it as consistent as possible. Like, okay, they do, 2 listening activities each class. And we know that, how long those are. We're actually looking at doing a seat time equivalency to kind of see if, really how much we're asking the students to do. But we do get a lot of feedback from our students also. And currently, Brian, I don't know if you're having the same thing. I mean, my students don't seem, it seems to be that we've somehow hit on kind of the appropriate level. Have we figured out how we've done that?
That's been my experience. I mean, as looking at it from so completely second what Meredith's saying, and then looking at it from a more design perspective, I feel, again, what you're seeing right now is on my screen. I'm on my laptop, so everything's a little bit compressed. But my general feeling is, and again, this is more personal preference, if there's more than 5 pages, it's starting to look a little heavy, like, oh, the student pulls it up, right? So there's always going to be this sense of anticipation. Okay, click on step 2, learn prepositions of cardinal place. What have I got? And their eyes are going to go right to this, and they're going to go right to this. And they're going to go, oh gosh, like 9 pages? So I try to keep it 5 or less. And then on any particular page, my kind of general rule of thumb is I shoot for usually no more than 2, a maximum of 3 actual kind of components. So I'm scrolling through the pages, and you can see there's 1 on each page, and 1 there, 1 there, 1 there, and 2 there. So what we're trying to affect here is a sense of momentum and progress. So students, okay, I'm done with that page. Great. I'm done with that page. Great. And again, it's not so much that let's race to the end. It's just a sense of, we got to be sensitive to the student might be working individually by themselves at 10 o'clock at night. And if we ask them to do this massive page, it could kind of they could run out of steam. So I would say in general, about 5 pages, and keeping it less than 3 or less sort of pieces per page. I feel like it's a good size. But again, we meet twice a week, and we have 30 sessions. I think that would be different if we met 3 times a week with, what would the math be? 45 sessions. And it would certainly be different if we were in a K through 12 context, maybe meeting 4 or 5 times a week, or 9 times every other week, something like that. So that would be kind of my general guideline.
Great. Regarding having the Big Time Spanish site put in your lesson as an iframe, someone was wondering if you've ever run into any problems with the size of the text, having a website kind of within a website within a website.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know that iframes, depending on who you talk to, you're going to get different sort of levels of popularity with, gosh, I've heard this direct line from a web designer, I hate iframes. So we have not, Big Time Spanish is a WordPress site, and it is also a secure site. It's been my experience that, and I don't know now, this is getting a little technical. If you don't have HTTPS, you're probably not going to be able to serve it as an iframe into SoftChalk. I think that's the case. But no, we really haven't had any major issues with text size. The one concern that we have had is sometimes if students, we found that Chrome is the best browser for D2L. And occasionally if a student is using another browser, this inner scroll bar will not appear. So a student will only see the first part of the page and they'll say, I can't get to the video. And no judgment, but that tends to happen with Firefox. Although, as you can see, I'm on Firefox and Chrome. Those tend to work very well. Firefox has been a little bit of an issue. But no, we haven't had an issue with text, with text size. It's been not an issue. The main issue is just making sure, since I'm managing Big Time Spanish, I need to make sure that I keep the software on the back end of that up to date. We only had one failure for a couple of hours because I forgot to update PHP, and it just, for those of you who know what I'm talking about, it was no longer functional. And that was as simple as clicking a button on the back end of Big Time Spanish. But no issues with text size. Text size.
Great. Regarding back to your videos, someone was wondering if you had anything out there that talks about how you mastered going from regular length videos to the recommended shorter ones.
I have no materials on that, but Natalie at the end is going to share our contact information. I'd be more than happy to talk about the strategies that I've used to do that. I sort of created a little set of parameters for myself that when I was composing, I would follow those. And I'd be more than happy to share. It's informal, but I'd be happy to share that with anybody who is interested in talking about that. What I will say is that I always started with the graphics first. So rather than talking and trying to say, what is this going to look like? I would say, what is this going to look like and how am I going to talk about it? Which was kind of a change in perspective. So for example, if we're dealing with the conjugation of a verb and how a verb form changes over the different people who might be doing it, I, you, he, she, it, we, you, they, for example, and think, well, how do I want to visually represent this? And then how am I going to talk about it? But yeah, maybe that would be a good performance objective for next academic year to produce a little bit of material on how one can do that. But I'm happy to share with anybody individually at a different time.
Great. And yep, I will be sharing their contact information once we're done with Q&A. Just a couple more questions. With everything that you've shown us being in D2L and online, someone was wondering, what do you all actually do when you're in the classroom?
Go for it, Meredith.
So
we just have a recording of ourselves and we just press play.
So this was kind of a big switch for us, is that because we teach hybrid classes, so they're learning the material before coming into class, or that's what's supposed to be happening. Our students then show up to class and we have a lot of fun. We practice all of the material that they were doing and we're lecturing quite a bit less. So they're coming into class and we're going straight into activities with the material that they have been practicing. So, our classes are pretty dynamic at this point, since there's not a lot of me standing at a board and conjugating verbs and then taking notes. That just isn't happening. They're coming into class and they are prompted to, get into partners and play taboo, and then they're getting into a new group and there's an image going up on the board and they're creating a fake dialogue, and they tend to have a lot of fun with just kind of using everything. And we tend to tell them, here's the material that we've been practicing, so we'd like to see this material in your dialogue. So they're getting parameters and instructions on those things, and then we are correcting and helping and working on a lot of pronunciation in class. And we've just felt that it's really freed our class time up to do what we really want to do in the class. And our main goal with Spanish is really creating Spanish speakers and working on the communication side in our classes. And we have a lot more time to do that.
To put some numbers on that, and I didn't prepare this, we have a report on this that we produced for our performance perspective, but we used to teach, our classes are 5-credit classes, and they used to be 2 hours and 45 minutes long, twice a week. And we did
2 hours and 15 minutes.
2 hours and 15 minutes. Sorry, maybe it felt like 2 hours and 45 minutes. 2 hours and 15 minutes. And we determined that we were spending approximately 35% of that time in conversational activity. When we moved to this hybrid OER platform, our classes are now 1 hour and 15 minutes, and we are closer to 90% conversational activities. And so we are spending almost half the amount of time in the classroom as before, and we are doing more time conversing than we were before, if that makes any sense.
That's
so
great.
The efficiency rate is way higher. And to put another example on that, in my Spanish 3 class, for example, they learned restaurant vocabulary. We came into class, we did a brief vocabulary review where they kind of played the game Taboo with vocabulary. It's what you use to clean off your mouth. It's next to your table. Sometimes it's made of paper, sometimes made of cloth. Oh, a napkin. And then we jumped into a 45-minute restaurant simulation where they created menus. This is all in Spanish. They created menus. They had guided conversations about certain topics as if they were sitting at a restaurant. There were waiters. The waiters were communicating with the kitchen staff that was providing stuff. Meanwhile, there was music and all kinds of problems. And if you stepped into this, you might think, wow, this is total chaos. But what's going on is we're just implementing the language. And, it's kind of a trite to say we've gone from being the sage on the stage to the guide on the side, but that's what it really feels like. And as somebody who's been teaching language for 15 years, the level of refreshment and joy that I feel in the classroom is so much higher than like, come on, it's not a regular verb. Why are you conjugating it like a regular verb? Is really, really rejuvenating.
That's wonderful. It's really great to hear. Someone else was wondering how and who determines the selection of topics that a student should learn depending on their level?
Well, so we have, so for Colorado, we have specific curriculum that we do have to cover in each class. And so we can go and look and say, okay, our colleges, we've all agreed that these are the learning outcomes and this is what we need to cover in class. And so, but then how we're going to do that is up to us. So we're free to then decide how we want to teach that material. We're not required to be OER, but we've chosen to go that direction. There's other schools, just right down the street that are covering the same topics, but they're doing it in a different way.
And so we have state, specifications, and I think it's a good opportunity to go back to really quickly the idea of being bound. It used to be before that you got these state things, and so you're thinking, okay, what textbook can I use that will match that within the first, say, 8 chapters so I can cover Spanish 1. And so you almost have like 2 sets of handcuffs on. Now what we have is a set of state level curricular objectives, for lack of a better way of saying it. And then we just decide how are we going to achieve that. And that allows us as faculty to get into creativity and design and experimentation. And then within the department, we just kind of talk it out and make decisions amongst ourselves, which is usually a very pleasant and fun experience.
And are all of the sections of these courses using these materials, or do you have some professors within your department still sticking to the traditional methods?
No, we're all using this.
Okay.
Although we started, it's been a process, right? So
Yeah.
we didn't just like unveil this one day and go, ah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of bumbling and fumbling, to be honest, to get towards where we are now. So there was a time when we were kind of, we were all kind of like doing slightly different things. And what's really interesting, and hopefully I can articulate this, Meredith, if I screw it up, get in there. Right now, the class looks exactly the same for each student that takes it. It's all the same quizzes, it's all the same tutorials, but the nuances and the idiosyncrasy of the instructor in the classroom are probably more pronounced than they've ever been.
Right.
So like, I feel like my class is more my class than ever, but yet I could step into Meredith's class and teach her class and vice versa with zero problems.
Yeah, and if you're thinking about doing something like this, we did kind of pilot this. So we didn't have all of our students, excuse me, we didn't have all of our students immediately doing this. So Brian started. And then,
yeah, and then we had Meredith jump on, and then the final step was to bring in our part-time instructors who are now doing this, which of course requires part-timers to be, there's a training that's required for that. But, it opens up doing it that way. I think, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I probably would have scoffed at, no, I want my independence. But doing it this way has opened up some really unforeseen options that are super cool. So for example, like if something comes up with Meredith's class, I can easily go in there and teach it, and vice versa. Or, we can team teach a class, or we can share office hours. So for example, if a student can't get me in my office, they can go to Meredith, and she knows exactly what a student is dealing with, exactly what's going on. And we also are instructors in all of our courses. So if Meredith has like a tech issue, because I'm kind of more of the techie guy on this, if something goes wrong with a quiz, she can shoot me a text and say, hey, what's up with this quiz? And I can go into her class and fix it. And so we're kind of all up in each other's business, but it kind of works really well and gives us a much greater degree of flexibility and independence. So it's kind of paradoxical that by forsaking all of the individuality of our courses, we've actually become way more stylized.
And then if a student goes from, taking Spanish 1 with me and then take Spanish 2 with Brian, they walk into class and they go into that and it looks exactly like their Spanish 1 class did. And so there's, the learning curve, they can just like start working.
Right. Yeah. So it's seamless as far as, for us, persistence is a big deal. We want our students to go from Spanish 1 to Spanish 2 to Spanish 3 and so on. So it's really important that it's not, oh, it made perfect sense when Brian was teaching it, but now when I'm with Jennifer, I'm totally confused, or vice versa. So we have real great continuity between courses.
And in terms of continuity and consistency, someone was asking, do you have a master course shell for all faculty to import into kind of their official course, or how do you distribute this to the other faculty?
It's a great question. And it, in my mind, what we would like to have would be a master course shell that is served to all individual courses. And so let's say if we find a bug in Spanish 1, we change the master shell and all versions of that course are updated. Unfortunately, Desire to Learn or Brightspace doesn't offer that functionality. So what we actually have are, right now, if we're running, let's say 3 Spanish 111 courses, there are 3 shells. And if there's a problem in them, I've got to fix them 3 times. So that, since we only have 3 courses, isn't such a big deal, but that could be a big deal if you're talking about, say, 25 courses or 30 courses. And then what we do is we keep one course. So it's usually mine just because it's easy to remember. That's the course we copy from fall to spring, and then spring to summer, and summer to fall. So I think ideally, from a conceptual and a technical perspective, it would be better to have a master, but practically speaking, it's much easier to just keep what we have as the actual implementation is our master. So that's kind of a technical shortcoming from my perspective of our LMS.
Great. And then this is the final question, and I think it's a good one to end on. Other than time, do you all have any costs to you personally for going the OER route?
Oh, good question. Like financial, like, am I paying money?
I guess
personally?
for other have not using the textbook, have you incurred additional costs for Camtasia or things like that for creating these additional materials?
Meredith, have you incurred any costs?
No, I have not.
So we have Camtasia, SoftChalk Create, Camtasia do cost money, but we have a license at our college, so that doesn't come out of my pocket. I am, as an individual, I do pay for, I did buy the domain for Big Time Spanish, which was, I think, like $7 when I bought it years ago. And I do pay an annual rate to a host, to a provider, so that I could be on the internet. So I do pay out of pocket. I think it's less than $100 a year for me to serve Big Time Spanish. And that's just something that I've come to terms with. I prefer that Big Time Spanish be I don't want to say mine, but I don't want to get entangled with having the state of Colorado paying the server server fees, because that creates all kinds of problems. So I do pay for that. And there was a time when I wanted a little bit more control over the videos. So I actually paid out of pocket for Vimeo Pro. That just gives you a really high level of control over what happens with the videos. I don't do that anymore. And that was like $100 a year. So, it's definitely possible to incur some costs, but I would say right now, I just serve up a website, and to be honest, I feel really grateful that I'm able to produce that and that so many people are able to use it. And so for me, to be honest, on an annual basis, paying the server fee, whatever it is, $40-50 it's not a thing for me personally, but that's it. That's the only fee.
Great. All right, well, that is it. So I will take back the screen and give everyone the contact information, and then we will wrap up.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for participating, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for sticking with us after the hour for all of that great Q&A. I think we got a lot of great compliments on the webinar and both of your teaching styles. So I really appreciate you both for this presentation this afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us. As I mentioned, both Brian and Meredith have shared their contact information. It's up on your screen right now. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to contact them directly. If you have any more questions or want to learn more about SoftChalk, you can visit softchalk.com or send an email to learnmore@softchalk.com, and we'd be happy to help with anything that we can. And that's it. Thanks again, everyone, and hope you have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.